So, how does a tiny, outlawed religious movement go from basically hiding in the shadows to becoming the official faith of the most powerful empire on Earth? It's an incredible story. Today, we're diving into the 300-year journey of early Christianity's rise. And let me tell you, it's a journey packed with faith, fire, philosophy, and a total reversal of power you won't believe. Let's get right into it. Okay, so let's just set the stage here. Take a look. Around 60 AD, on the left, you've got Christians as this tiny, misunderstood minority, meeting in secret, always looking over their shoulder. Now, let's fast forward just over 300 years to 400 AD. On the right, the church is this massive public institution, building these grand cathedrals with the emperor's own money. I mean, what a change. So the big question is, how on earth did that happen? What forces, both outside and inside, could possibly fuel such a monumental shift? To even begin to answer that, we have to go back and understand just how radical early Christianity seemed to the Romans. This wasn't just another spiritual option you could pick and choose from. No, this was a fundamental challenge to their entire way of life. And this, right here, this gets to the heart of the whole conflict. You see, the Roman Empire was actually pretty tolerant of other religions, but there was one big condition. You also had to pay your respects to the Roman gods, and, of course, the emperor, who was considered divine. And Christians, they just wouldn't. Their insistence on one and only one God wasn't just a difference of opinion. To the Romans, it looked like atheism, and even worse, it looked like treason. And yet, that very exclusivity was a huge part of its appeal. In a world full of transactional, kind of fickle gods, the idea of a single, loving God who cared for everyone, slave or free, was absolutely revolutionary. So while a lot of women saw this new faith as just some bizarre superstition, really educated converts like Justin Martyr saw something completely different. They found a worldview that actually made sense, that offered real answers to life's biggest questions, a sense of purpose, and a hope for an afterlife that the pagan cults just couldn't match. For people like him, this wasn't just another religion, it was the ultimate truth. And that intellectual and spiritual pull was a powerful engine for conversion, drawing people in even with all the incredible risks. And believe me, it was dangerous. That conflict with the Roman state wasn't just theoretical. It often exploded into brutal, violent persecution. It was a true trial by fire. Now, it's really important to get this right. Christians weren't being hunted down every single day across the entire empire. The persecutions were often localized, kind of sporadic. They'd flare up under certain emperors or governors and then die down again. But that threat was always there, like a storm on the horizon that could break at any moment. And this timeline really shows you those waves. Early on, you have the infamous Emperor Nero scapegoating Christians for that great fire in Rome. A century later, you see intellectuals like Justin Martyr being executed simply for their beliefs. And then, boom, at the start of the 4th century, you get the Great Persecution under Emperor Diocletian. This was the most systematic, the most widespread attempt to just completely wipe the faith off the map. So how in the world did the church survive this? Well, paradoxically, its greatest weapon wasn't a sword. It was the power of witness. You see, the Greek word for witness is martyr. By choosing to die rather than renounce their faith, these early Christians offered the most powerful testimony you could possibly imagine. This quote really captures it. The sheer constancy of the martyrs, facing these horrific tortures without backing down, it had a profound and often completely opposite effect on Roman society. Instead of stamping out the faith, the persecutions actually inspired awe. It drew in new converts who saw a conviction that was literally worth dying for. But, the threats to the early church weren't only coming from the outside. As the faith grew and spread, it faced a whole new internal challenge, a battle for its very soul, one that was fought not in arenas, but in the hearts and minds of its own followers. And this was the central question. Think about it. There's no single headquarters, no official New Testament compiled yet, and the faith is just spreading like wildfire. So you start to get different teachers promoting very different ideas about who Jesus was, about God, about salvation. It became really clear that all this growth demanded clarity. This is where the whole concept of heresy becomes so important. And we're not talking about minor disagreements here. A heresy was seen as a fundamental break from the core teachings passed down from the apostles. It was a threat that could literally shatter the unity of the faith from the inside out. This quote right here, it gets right to the point. Early church leaders believed that if something was a divine truth, it had to be definite, it had to be certain. To them, being vague or contradictory wasn't a sign of being open-minded. It was a sign of being wrong. To truly know God, you had to know precisely what you believed about him. So what were they debating? Oh, just absolutely everything fundamental. I mean, was Jesus divine? Or was he human? Or was he both? Was the church a visible, organized institution? Or was it just some invisible spiritual movement? What even were the sacraments? Which books belonged in the Bible? These debates were fierce, and their outcomes would go on to define mainstream Christianity for the next 2,000 years. So for almost 300 years, Christians are navigating this double threat: persecution from the outside, division on the inside. And then, in the early 4th century, something happens that absolutely no one could have predicted. The entire game changed, literally overnight. 313 AD. This year, right here, is one of the most massive turning points in all of Western history. With the Edict of Milan, the Roman state declared religious tolerance, officially ending the long, brutal era of Christian persecution. And the man behind this was the new emperor himself. Emperor Constantine. Yeah, his conversion story is legendary. A vision of a cross in the sky before a huge battle. Whatever his real motivations were, his actions were a complete 180. He didn't just stop the persecutions, he started actively supporting the church. The state that had been Christianity's greatest enemy was suddenly becoming its greatest ally. Constantine's impact was just off the charts, and it kind of happened in 3 huge steps. First, legalization. For the first time, being a Christian was safe. Then came patronage. Imperial money starts pouring in, building these huge churches, giving bishops positions of public importance. And finally, unification. Constantine actually pushes for it, even calling the famous Council of Nicaea to help the church settle its own internal debates and to find its core beliefs. This imperial embrace just catapulted the church into an entirely new reality. The age of martyrs was over. The age of emperors, bishops, and councils had begun. And so, by the time we get to our end point, 400 AD, the transformation is complete. The church isn't just a part of the empire anymore. In many ways, it's becoming the glue that holds the whole thing together. You have powerful bishops like St. Ambrose of Milan who can now publicly stand up to emperors and actually win. The faith that began in the margins was now right at the very center of power. And that brings us to our final thought, this journey from the catacombs to the imperial court. It's an astonishing story of survival and triumph, but it also raises this really profound question that echoes down through history. When a faith, built on spiritual witness and rejecting worldly power, suddenly gets all of that power, what's lost and what's gained? It's a question that really makes you think, doesn't it? Thanks for joining us.